Yeah, not too bad, thank you. Yourself?
Yeah, busy. Silly busy at the moment. So yeah, it's just nice to have a Friday where it's a bit quieter.
Yeah, I would love to say the same, but it's not been quiet for me.
Oh no.
I'm doing a conditional access rollout at the moment.
Ooh.
And like full conditional access for zero trust rollout, and they're always intense. They're always really, really intense. Yep. And the organization that I'm working with, we kind of have that strategy discussion initially, and now Steve, and we've kind of decided these are the policies that they want to apply, and this is kind of how they want the organization should be running. We've got the policies in place. We've started doing that sort of Ring Zero pilot testing, and we just had the rest of the IT team on this morning to kind of run through the policies and what has been agreed. And it's then turned into, oh, well, we've actually got this going on in the environment that management weren't aware of, or we've got this niche requirement that's going on, and it's like they're just poking holes in all the policies and all the rest of it. So it was just kind of ironing all of that stuff out, but yeah, getting there. So I feel like I've lost my voice a little bit because I've been talking nonstop for the last 2 hours.
So are you doing Passkeys, or is it just number
Passkeys
matching?
As well?
Oh,
Passkeys as well. Passkeys, which is great for our talking point today, right?
Absolutely. I was actually pushing Passkeys out last week, 2 weeks ago, with a customer, but it came across a group policy object that was enforcing hardware tokens, hardware keys, as opposed to passkeys on the authenticator app. So it would just splash up saying, please insert your USB key. And even though they set up a passkey on their phone, their GPO would not allow you to use a phone as your authenticator. It had to be a USB key. So it was for a pilot bunch of users. So we've disabled the GPO, but we've had to abandon it just now.
Right.
Which is a shame because, again, they're at the very start of their journey. So if you're pushing out MFA to your users, go Passkeys, because rather than go phish-resistant, because obviously the demo you guys do shows exactly why you don't want to do number matching. But people just not at that level yet, I think. Companies, onboarding, it's always going to be an issue as well, isn't it? Because you got to get that either a logic app running or some automated way to send the passkeys to the users. I've been working on something for that as well, but yeah.
I remember you saying. Well, maybe we can get into that later on, because I'm keen to know a little bit more about what you've kind of built there. But I guess so. I guess today's kind of topic is going to be passkeys. Let's kind of chat through those and the kind of experience that the three of us have had with helping organizations implement them. But does anyone want to kind of kick things off by maybe just giving a quick explanation on what passkeys are for anyone that's maybe listening or watching?
Steve, I'll let you run with it because you two do such a good session with your exfiltration.
So I appreciate that. So I'll be honest, passkeys are a bit of a dark art to me. I'm not going to lie. I'm behind the curve on this one.
That's why I passed it to you. It's the same for me.
So I was really looking forward to somebody else explaining it on my behalf, and I was just going to play devil's idiot throughout this entire podcast, I think.
I mean, funny we talk about it. I picked up that today from my Amazon locker because I got that delivered. I mean, I use the passkeys on my authenticator app anyway, but I thought, right, I'll get a USB-C key as well, just so I've got kind of that dual protection in case I do lose my phone, because I think we all have it with MFA. It's a chicken and the egg. You need MFA now to set up MFA, whereas before you could set up MFA by just signing in. It says, right, we need to make your account secure, but ideally now you should have some kind of protection. And that's where my kind of intro to passkeys came into play. It was when Microsoft then supported the Authenticator app. So you could then use a passkey, scan the QR code with your phone, sign in with the Authenticator app. But then obviously FIDO2 keys I think, are probably one of the better options as well. And with when you register new security options in your security settings, you've got to do MFA at that point anyway. So that's where the chicken and the egg comes. And that's where temporary access passes came into play.
Apps, yeah.
So users need a temporary access pass at the very beginning in order to register for the passkey. So it's just the phish-resistant MFA at the end of the day. I mean, again, like your demo did before, if you log in, somebody sent you one of those nice evil jinx links, you click on it with your passkey, it'll just tell you to bugger off because it's not a valid URL. Because that URL could be RN Microsoft as opposed to Microsoft. So for the naked eye, it's
I
not
guess just
visible.
I guess just to kind of clarify that for anyone, any listeners, I guess the difference is that a passkey fundamentally can now apply to kind of two authentication methods. You've got the physical FIDO2 security key, which most people will be familiar with. And then you also have passkeys for authenticator, which can be like a device-bound passkey. And the terminology passkey is actually used interchangeably for both. But the idea is that it uses an asymmetric cryptographic key pair, right? Private key and a public key. Private key is stored on the passkey itself, and then the public key would be stored on the relying party. So in this case, Microsoft or Entra ID. So to your point, when a user might be getting phished by something like evil jinx, it can see when it's going through that authentication process that the user is trying to authenticate to, areyouevil.com, not microsoftonline.com, because it doesn't have a private key that's tied to that URL. Hence why it's phishing resistant. So that's kind of, I guess, the idea behind
Passkeys. Explained.
Yeah, so if I'm being honest, so when we scheduled this and we said passkeys, I 100% thought we were talking about the software passkeys. So like based on your authenticator app, or even based on your local Windows 11 machine now in TPM.
Yeah,
I'm getting invited to set up passkeys for everything.
Yeah, well, it is. Yeah, same thing. It's the same. It's the same thing. So you have your device-bound passkeys, which can be Windows Low for Business. Is also an appropriate passkey now.
Certificates.
Yeah, exactly. I guess the ones that kind of are used the most are your physical FIDO2 security keys, and like I said before, now the ones that are sort of built into the Microsoft Authenticator app, which I think is great because it kind of lowers the barrier for entry for those phish-resistant authentication methods, which typically have been a little bit more difficult for organizations to get rolled out because there is a cost overhead to buying keys initially, but also the provisioning process. So I think things have changed slightly, but you as an administrator never used to be able to provision a FIDO2 security key for a user. The user themselves had to do it. They had to go to the security info page and they had to register it from there. And then I think Ubico kind of bridged the gap a little bit with an application and their own, and they were able to tie into Entra ID so that you could kind of pre-register FIDO2 keys. And I think that capability has now come directly to the Graph API, and you can do it yourself. So there's nothing built into the Entra ID UI, but I think you can, using Graph API, you can actually register. You can register a FIDO2 key for an individual now, so you can actually ship them directly to the users, and they don't have to do it themselves. So it's getting there. It is getting easier.
How does that work with the PIN setup?
I was just going to ask the same thing.
Good question. I don't know. I haven't looked at it. And this is probably a good time to shout out Jan Bakker, because he's done a lot of stuff on passkeys specifically, but also the registration of these FIDO2 security keys before shipping them out to end users. And if anyone's watching or listening, definitely check out Jan Bakker's blog, because he's got a lot of content on there. In terms of implementation, I kind of know I've got some thoughts on implementing passkeys, specifically passkeys for Authenticator. But what have your kind of experiences been, Andy, with regards to that? Has it been easy, complicated?
It's relatively straightforward, but it depends who the end user is as well. So, I mean, we you know where I'm going with this. The customer I've been working with, we were doing a pilot for migration to Dynamics, but in order to do that, we wanted to get the mailboxes on Exchange Online as well, so you got the full rich coexistence, and that involved enabling MFA for them. So we thought, right, let's just do passkeys. The process is actually really, really straightforward. I personally think, especially if you're doing it on the Authenticator app, because you issue that tap, the temporary access pass to the user, one-time use, and all you do is you sign in on the Authenticator app using your Entra username, so email address, and your passkey, your tap. And then that creates a passkey on the device, and it gives you a few prompts. So if you haven't set up Authenticator as one of your password managers, it needs to do that. But then that's them set up with their passkey on their phone. It's actually a lot simpler than logging into Entra, scanning the QR code, and then setting up. Or I say it's easier. It's probably about the same easiness, really. There's a
couple of things to touch on there, though. Insofar as the registration process directly within the Authenticator app is actually different to the registration process where you scan the QR code.
Exactly.
The QR code method only applies if you've got attestation disabled. Yep. Insofar as you can't actually register it that way, if you're enforcing attestation of passkeys, it's only supported when you do it within the Authenticator app. So that's something to think about and look out for when you're going through and deploying this. The other thing is, you said there that sort of creating passkeys and kind of doing it all locally on the device is really straightforward, and it is until you start adding in conditional access policies. Depending on your environment. And that's, kind of what I'm dealing with at the moment for a customer. App protection policies. If you are kind of following that zero trust approach of applying your conditional access policies to all cloud apps. So, for example, all internal users, all cloud apps apply or enforce app protection policies. That will end up hitting the underlying APIs that is required to register a passkey. So what happens is when a user goes to the Authenticator app and goes through that create passkey process, it basically just fails. And when you go into the sign-in log, the reason why it's failing is because it's telling you the Microsoft Authenticator app doesn't support app protection policies. So you end up running it. You're unable to register a passkey. So what you then have to do is figure out how to create an appropriate exclusion. And it used to be that the only way to exclude, to allow that would be to temporarily exclude the user from the policy, which is just madness, and is what kind of Microsoft have in their documentation. But more recently, since they brought in audience reporting and all that kind of jazz, we can now see all of the underlying resources that an application is hitting. And I came across an interesting resource API. Let me get the name of it because I think I've got it to hand here, which was the Azure Credential Configuration Endpoint Service. And I did write a blog on it.
Rolls off the tongue.
Yeah, I know, right? And sort of side by side with that research that I was doing, somebody else within the security community, Nathan McNulty, came across the fact that if you exclude that application from those policies, that will then let you register the passkey.
Yep.
So that's the underlying API that was actually hitting the app protection policy requirement. So it is possible to kind of put exclusions in place. Nobody knows at the moment what those kind of long-term adverse effects might be from excluding those kind of resources. I guess only time will tell, or maybe Microsoft can tell us. There isn't any documentation on it at the moment. So kind of having some sort of temporary exclusion is usually the best option for that, whether that's with like an access package or whatever. Yeah. But I've found that has been really frustrating with the kind of deployment of Passkeys. And also that general onboarding process. Like if an organization is used to like the MFA interrupt wizard or even SSPR, that kind of does a really good job of hand-holding the user through setting up MFA. Yeah. There isn't anything really in place for that at the moment for Passkeys.
Do you not find the out-of-box, so the experience I've had traditionally is moving to Passkeys, i.e. migrating from whatever you're on now into Passkeys, is tedious, arduous, it's time-intensive, users are a pain, takes a while to get there. But once you've got it in place, do you not find that your new user process is just an absolute dream? You give them the username, you give them a tap, they sign into a brand new device, they go through the out-of-box experience, they get prompted to enroll for everything during the out-of-box experience. That bit, do you not think that works quite well in this scenario?
It's much better
Agreed, yeah.
once that, but it's getting to that point. And I think the biggest problem is new users versus existing users as well.
100%. Yeah. So, existing users, it's a pain. New users, beautiful.
It's so much easier with if you start up a new user, if you're even going passwordless, because if you only go passkey, you might as well go passwordless as well, I guess, in some ways. And that is where if you're doing it for a new user, well, they get their tap. That's one of the questions I've always thought. It's like, well, okay, we email their other email address, so onboarding, come through an HR system so that they're aware of their personal email address, and they get an email with the tap to it, a one-time use tap. It's how long do you set that tap to be alive for? Ideally, you want it to be as short as possible, but they're not going to receive the email and then go and set up immediately. So how long's too long and how short's too short, I guess, is one of the questions there as well. Is 8 hours too long? Possibly.
Do tabs not support number of uses as well as duration?
Yeah, so it's one time. You can have one-time use or multiple use. Yeah, and I would say for the onboarding one, ideally, you just want it to be one-time use. So then, if a user does sign in and it's expired or it's been used, they can then raise an issue there.
Yeah, that's more difficult than you think to try and achieve that one-time use. I think you'd have to have a bulletproof onboarding process in order to satisfy that one-time use. I'm just trying to think, even if you were doing like an onboarding, even if you're doing an onboarding using like autopilot, for example, if a user is signing in for the first time, they put their email address in, they put the tap in to do web sign-in into the device, they start going through the out-of-box experience, they'll be prompted to set up Windows Low for Business. Windows Low for Business requires MFA to set it up.
Yep.
So even at that point, you would need to be able to use the tap a second time to satisfy that and actually set up Windows Low for Business. So it's actually quite difficult to get away with that one-time use. I don't think I've ever managed to come up with an end-to-end scenario where you can only use it once.
I guess the idea is you should, hopefully they would set it up first time on their mobile device potentially. It's more of the order of process, because once they've got the passkey on the mobile device, you can then use your passkey on your device for MFA for Windows Low for Business.
So that's interesting. Yeah, do you know what? I don't think I've tried that yet, but if I kind of think about that from a first time sign in, so you download the Microsoft Authenticator app, sign in, you sign in with your email address, you sign in with the tap, it creates the MFA profile. But then when you create Passkey, I think that would prompt you again for MFA in order to create the Passkey. So I think, again, you would be prompted for the tap a second time, I think.
It does prompt for sign in when you click create Passkey.
Yeah. But then there is also a timeout when you, the sign-in frequency is only when you access the security info page. Because that's a whole other piece as well. Securing access to the security info page. So like what we typically try and do for clients is enforce require MFA to access the security info page, which obviously
is a good one.
Exactly, which is obviously going to cause a sign-in loop if it's the first time they've signed in, which requires a tap. But then device compliance, requiring a compliant device. So if you're requiring a compliant device, how do you satisfy that if your first time sign-in is on a mobile phone, which might not be compliant, or even on an autopilot device, which isn't going to be compliant until you've logged in and it's been had time to check up. So it's then you have to create an exclusion for that as well. So there's a lot of stuff to think about. And it's actually, although Passkeys for authenticators kind of lowered the bar and lowered the costs to roll out, I think it has kind of complicated things more on the back end.
Yeah, the technical complexities. Yeah, like you've almost got to think, like when you do Active Directory tiering, you've got a user that you bring in and then you bring the user up and you can work them up through AD. You're almost kind of having to do that with your new starters. You're like, okay, so a new starter goes in this group and for this point, they can't access any of these resources, but they can access these. And then you could, I don't know if you could use dynamic group membership rules to kind of bump them up as things become.
That's something I've thought about before. It's almost, you have it so you got a service that runs and checks the users, and if they've then registered the tap or whatever, it then automatically adds them to another group.
And move them up until they're fully fledged users.
It just moves them up. Yeah. So
I think Nathan McNulty's got a Logic app that does something similar. When we were kind of discussing that whole app protection policy piece and the exclusion for that resource, I'm sure he's got a Logic app on his GitHub, which will monitor the Entra sign-in, the Entra audit logs, so that when a user has registered a passkey, it removes them from the policy that allows them to actually register on an unmanaged device, for example. So yeah, I mean, you can absolutely implement that kind of stuff.
Because the argument there is obviously, I worked with a university who are looking just for MFA, and they were complaining that users have to. Or they could defer at that point, so the 14 days for setting up MFA. And it's the whole thing of when you send a user their username and email address, or email address and password even, it's usually sent to them via email to their Hotmail, Gmail, or whatever. So you've got to make sure the onboarding process is tight. But obviously you're transmitting a password and a username via email. I mean, you could send it as a text to them, but that's another way. How do companies onboard it? Do they send it via encryption, or do they send it just as plain text? But effectively, it's still the same. Even if you send a tap, whether it's one-time or multi-time use, that very beginning, it's not secure because it's going to another platform, i.e. Hotmail, Gmail, or something, and you're sending credentials to that as well. So it's
I definitely think there's a conversation to have there. And I had a similar conversation with a client in the educational sector, where we really wanted to use temporary access passes to help onboard students. But the reality of it is, these students would be sent details via email, to their personal email addresses, and they might sit there for weeks before they actually go ahead and do the actual onboarding. So a temporary access pass just becomes pointless, because then it's a phone call into the help desk and they have to create a new tap. And before you know it, the process that's supposed to be in place to streamline onboarding has actually just caused them more hassle. So there is definitely a conversation to have there with regards to how you actually communicate those temporary access. But and the idea is, though, I guess, is that if a temporary access pass is the initial credential that's been sent, and it does sit there for a longer period of time, if an adversary gets hold of it, by the time they get hold of it, it's useless. I guess is the idea there. Whereas a password would be a little bit different, right?
Exactly.
So there's a lower risk to sending it via those means. I guess. But
I think
it needs a rethought of the whole onboarding process more than anything, doesn't it? You can't expect to be doing the same old stuff in the same old way and not be getting the same old risks. So I guess So what we would tend to do is we would send you. I mean, we're quite lucky because most of our customers the first day is physically in the office. There's an induction, there's a contract signing process, there's HR stuff, and then here's a laptop, here's a phone. So we can kind of go through all that at the same time. But generally, we'll get a new user request come in. The form will have the username, the email address, and everything that they want the user to have on it. We will either just reply with the password, say we've created the user as requested, here's a temporary password, which will obviously prompt them to change it when they next sign in and hopefully set up credentials again. But I'm massively advocating for the help desk just to issue taps. Because I think it's the thing that we found out a while ago is one of our customers, they had an internal IT department, and their solution to new users was to exclude them from all conditional access policies. There was a group in conditional access policies called new starter exclusions, and I was like, what the hell is this? And they were like, oh, that's where we put the new starters. And I was like, why are you putting the new starters in there? And they're like, because they can't sign in otherwise. And I was like, literally go into your conditional access policy, click the little drop down for authentication strength, and click the one that says plus tap on the end of it, and they can do everything they need to do.
No, that's it.
But people are still trying to do it the way they've always done it. Like, here's a username, here's a password, here's a laptop. Everything's going to work fine. But
that's it. The other thing I found with Passkeys is the best thing for your privileged accounts is Passkey. So any account with privileged identity is use a Passkey because you want to secure it as best you can. However, I
think I know where this is going.
Yeah, using that with my Mac, and if I'm RDPing onto a server, it doesn't work.
Do you not redirect the passkey through MSTSA?
No,
the problem is it uses Bluetooth, doesn't it?
Yeah, or it's whether you use a USB or a Bluetooth one. It on my Mac, it won't redirect my Passkey authentication. It'll prompt me for it, but then when I put my Passkey in, if I'm using my FIDO2 key, touch it, put my PIN in, it'll just say an error's occurred. And if I try it with scan the QR code, it just hangs there. It doesn't work. But the other thing...
Sorry, go on.
No, on you go.
I was going to say it uses WebAuthn, right? So to do that authentication. So if you were trying to use a passkey on Authenticator to RDP into another device, RDP, Windows 365, AVD, whatever you want to call it, whatever it is, the only way that actually works is if you've got single sign-on enabled, which you typically wouldn't have enabled for an admin account. So you're not going to use single sign-on from your physical into a remote device, which would facilitate usage of the passkey for Authenticator. But WebAuthn is supported for physical FIDO2 security keys. So you should be able to access a server or some sort of remote device via passkeys, but it has to be the physical security key.
Because if I'm on the server, or so I'm on my POR, because we do everything from a privileged access workstation, don't we?
What we do.
Yes.
I'm logged onto a virtual POR from a Mac, and I then try and access the portals. It has all sorts of issues with even using my physical key. But the other thing I've learnt is, this was in my playing around test lab, never register more than one Entra on one key. It's handy because you can have multiple Entra accounts on the same key. Mm-hmm. But if you say for your own personal labs or whatever, you've got your privileged account registered on your everyday account as well. If you use it to sign in, so you use the web sign-in, so you plug in your physical key into your device, whichever account was used registered last, it will log on with.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, I've never tried, but that makes sense, I guess. Yeah,
it would log me on with my admin account to my PC. It's like, no, I want to log on as myself, and it's that whole chain of events that can then occur from that. So, I mean, in production, you would never register a privileged account in your everyday accounts FIDO2 key anyway, I would hope. I know it's convenient because you can, two keys for one, but it's ideally keep your privileged accounts on a separate key as well. I mean, on the Authenticator app, great, because when you sign in, it gives you a list of what you want to use to sign in with. But on your physical key, if you sign in on your device with it as well, it will sign you in with the last registered account on there.
Yeah, it's interesting you say two accounts on one key when I've got 2 keys for one account. I've got a backup and a daily driver.
That's I've got the one I got today. I just fancied having a look at one of those smaller ones, but I've got the NFC one as well. So I'm going to end up with 2 accounts or multiple accounts on 2 keys. So literally just back up, and then it's on my phone as well.
Yeah. And I think in the case of certainly, presumably this is why you've got 2, Steve, is for your break glass accounts. Yeah. So you've got 2 keys. If one breaks or gets lost or stolen or, whatever, you've got another one and backup. And I do like that you can add multiple passkeys to a single account. I think that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Do you remember my frustration though when I was enrolling those keys?
I don't. What was it?
I was going out of my mind. So basically, I bought a rather expensive YubiKey, like a £60 NFC fancy one, and then I bought the cheapest one. And when I enrolled them in the portal, the cheaper one was coming up with the name was different. I can't remember what it was. It was saying one was saying like hardware token, the other one was saying like security key. And when I was searching the definitions in the Entra portal, one was better than the other, but it was the cheap one that had the better name. And I was like, why is it doing this? It's not detecting some features. It's seeing the fancy one as a rubbish one. So I downloaded the Ubi tools and I was going through them and I was looking at all the features, making sure FIDO2 was enabled, making sure all the different versions of FIDO2 in there. I was like, why is it doing this? Turns out, just takes Entra about 40 minutes to update the table with the name of what the key is. But yeah, for 40 minutes, I was getting really frustrated that the cheaper of the 2 keys was showing us having better features in the Entra portal. But just a question, sorry, Andy, the redirection issue that you're having, is that exclusive to Mac OS? I presume does Windows do it okay?
No, Windows works fine. So I use my Windows 365 Link device.
Yeah.
And because the reason I came up with that, or I experienced that, was auth context. Mm-hmm. So using privileged account, you then elevate yourself to GA, for example, and it prompts you for MFA. And I couldn't then do that. Whereas from a Win 365 boot, Windows 365 Link device, or from my Surface to Win 365 or AVD, it worked fine. But just from the Mac, it didn't work. I think it's more of a limitation on the Windows app on Mac than anything, I think. So it's probably not the Mac issue. It's the way the Windows app integrates.
I'll have to try it on my Mac Quest.
Definitely. And of course, when you then Google something, I've got a problem with the Windows app. Of course, it gives you every single app available for Windows.
Yeah.
I mean, what Microsoft thinking calling it Windows app?
They've just launched it for MetaQuest, apparently.
Oh, yeah.
So, there's now a proper AVD, RDP, Windows 365 app for MetaQuest or Meta OS, or Horizon OS, whatever they call it.
That's pretty cool. I tell you why, that's super cool, because they've just released remote app for Windows 365.
Right.
So you can just boot into the apps. I imagine that'd be quite cool on VR, right?
Just have three big screens in augmented reality.
I like that.
The downside of the remote app for Win 365 at the moment is only for frontline worker licenses.
I didn't know that.
No, because I thought, I want to play around with that. I want to have a look, because I thought I can then use projects and Visio on my Win 365 PC as remote apps on my Mac.
Yeah.
But no, you have to have frontline worker license for it.
Oh, that's interesting. I wonder if they'll change that at some point.
Probably. I still think it's AVD and not working on the link is a big miss. The fact you can't connect to AVD from Windows 365 boot or the link device is a big...
A bit off piece, but is that a planned feature? Because it needs to be if it isn't.
Probably not, because Microsoft will want you to buy the license for Win 365.
Which
it's more revenue. Yeah.
I get, to be fair, I don't understand how it's more revenue. When you look at that license and the amount of bang for buck you're getting for 40 quid a month per user, you can't buy that on Azure for that price. So it's putting the knees off of Azure pricing is Windows 365, but AVD still has its place. So it's an interesting one. I'm trying to encourage customers, and we're going way off piece now. I try and encourage customers to go Win 365 cloud PCs where applicable. Yeah. But depending on the nature of their users and what they need the cloud environment for, AVD is still my go-to.
It's a combination of both, I think, in any place. But yeah, we're way off piece. That's for another chat.
That's for another episode. Sorry.
Yeah,
Passkeys,
absolutely.
Bring it back.
Passkeys, yeah.
Well, yeah. So I guess to kind of wrap things up, I mean, it feels to me like the general consensus is passkeys are a good thing. The fact that they've now come to the Authenticator app absolutely lowers the barrier for entry, but admins should be careful. Should be careful from a configuration perspective. There is absolutely a user experience, and particularly on user onboarding experience there to iron out and make sure that you've kind of got that where it needs to be. Otherwise you'll end up with a really poor user experience and people just will not see the benefit. But then likewise is the admin overhead and the architecture, if you like. There's a lot to unpack and think about there with regards to getting that working smoothly.
I think it's also sorry, go on, Andy.
I was going to say that when I've been doing it recently with this customer, most of them have company issued mobiles, which is fine, and a lot of them, or they've got the Geo app on there for their VPN, but then they have the Microsoft Authenticator because they also authenticate to NHS, for example. But a number of them, their devices are so out of date and they're not supported for passkeys, because for Android, I think it has to be version 15. iOS, I think it's version 18 or 17 or 18. And then it then brought to light the number of people who aren't actually keeping their devices up to date. And these are company issued managed mobiles, so they should be up to date, but it shows where.
I mean, you've just opened a can of worms there as well with regards to Android, because Android is just a nightmare for dealing with passkeys, because different make and models of Android devices, for some unknown reason, struggle to register a passkey from within Microsoft Authenticator. It's to do with the vault that it's stored in, because some of them have kind of their own built-in passkey stores, and they don't like to be set to something else other than that. Just you also have like the work profile and the personal profile, trying to understand which one to put it in. There's all sorts of quirks with Android devices when it comes to passkeys.
I presume if you're stuck with the first-party ones, so Samsung with Knox or Google phones, for example, I presume you'll have a fairly consistent experience. Is it just?
So you'd think so. I think generally speaking, the newer devices are better. I've had new Samsungs before where people just cannot register a passkey because it keeps trying to store the passkey in Samsung's built-in passkey store, and it just would not let them change it to the Microsoft Authenticator app. That was a one-off, to be fair. That was the only time I'd ever dealt with a new phone where someone was struggling. What I usually see is older devices or cheap devices. A lot of organizations will buy cheap Androids, cheap Samsungs for the workforce. Those seem to have issues registering passkeys as well. But it's hit and miss. It really is hit and miss. Whereas iPhones, touch wood, most of the time they just work.
Shill. You shill. I think so. The thing for me, though, I think that the biggest takeaway with passkeys, when I say passkeys, to me in my head, it's still the Authenticator app or local TPM. Hardware tokens for me are FIDO2 keys, but in the context of thinking of a passkey as being a software solution to that, so your phone, your TPM, etc. I think if you were to go down the, let's call it PKI sort of authentication route, so you wanted public-private certificates for users, historically that was rolling out cards, FIDO2 keys, whether it was smart cards or FIDO2 USB devices, rolling out hardware that was compatible, rolling out policies, onboarding. It was logistical. It was a tedious. The adoption process was a pain.
Yep.
But now that you can do it through the Authenticator app, or you can do it through Windows Hello for Business with your TPM and whatnot, those hardware solutions are now the exception, not the norm for these type of projects. Yeah. So I think a lot of businesses that have probably thought about using those in the past, it'd be well worth revisiting now, because they probably find the reasons they didn't do it in the past don't exist nowadays.
Yeah,
or they would be the exception. I think.
Yeah, absolutely.
100%.
And I think that's probably a good place to wrap up.
A bit over.
Think?
No, definitely.
Yeah. Cool. Okay. Well, look, I mean, I think that was a really good discussion. I think there's probably even more to unpack Passkeys, but
definitely.
maybe we'll get the opportunity to dive into that another day. But look, I mean, it was a good chat. It was great to catch up, Andy, and you, Steve. And I guess we'll catch you next time.
I think we still need to follow up from the bring your own device one.
I do. I feel like there's a lot more to unpack on BYOD as well. So maybe we'll loop back onto that at some point.
Job done. Don't do BYOD.
Yes, yeah, you're not wrong.
We've got AVD to talk about as well. So
let's do that next. That's a good one.
What, AVD?
AVD, yeah. Let's do that next. Cool. Okay. Cool. All right, guys. Take it easy.
Take care. Enjoy your day.
Bye.